Hi, this is TabCat. Welcome to part 6 of the Civilization 5 tutorial series. My original goal for this installment was to do a kind of fast-forwarded highlight reel of the mid and late game following what we had showed of the playthrough as Greece in parts 1 through 5. But I realized that I wanted to go back and just summarize what we've already covered. You know, if you were going to have to try to recap what happened over, the course of those turns, you'd have to watch almost 2.5 hours of video. And as I've said repeatedly, these first 100 to 125 turns, that's the backbone of the entire playthrough, and many of your games will largely be decided in that window. So I think it's too important to just push on past that, especially because the last couple of installments I felt like were very heavy on a kind of let's play focus and not as much on a true tutorial the way the first couple of episodes were. So let's go ahead and cover some of these basic topics. Now, one thing I realized, by the way, that I didn't even cover in episode 1, I just made a brief mention of the fact we were going to play as Greece and talked about what makes them special. And a viewer pointed out that, I didn't really talk about how do you pick a civilization and things like that. So I'm not going to try to do that now. But that is an important decision that you need to make. You should definitely be looking at the unique abilities as well as the unique units that each civ has. So that's something I hope to cover in a future installment. And in the meantime, I would say if you're looking for a good, strong civilization in just a general way, not one that's highly suited to one particular type, Greece is very good. That's why I picked them for this series. And then another one I would say is quite good and flexible is Rome. It's not that neither of them would be better for one, or, yes, it is possible that they are better for one type of victory than another. But I'm pretty sure you could win the game in literally any victory method with either of those two, and have an easier time doing it than you could with a lot of others. So I'll leave it at that for just a moment, but that is something we'll try to come back to. Okay, so you've picked your civ and you've started the game. Now, when you're looking at the map and you're trying to decide where to settle, how do you make that call? Well, should you move your settler? Is it hopeless and you should just reload and do a new game? Here's some things that I would look at. Number 1, will your capital be on a river? Rivers are very beneficial. It'll allow you to build a garden and get more great people. You can also, there's other structures that you get later as well. And that's probably my number 1. Another factor is whether you're getting 2 unique luxuries. Now, I can't remember when I've ever seen a map where I didn't. You may not see both of them before you settle the city, but once you clear out the fog of war from a couple of tiles around you, you pretty much always do. So if you move, just make sure you don't move out of range of one of those luxuries. Good food production, that's another one. And this is something, by the way, I'll just mention as far as when you pick a civilization, realize that each civ has its own bias as to what kind of terrain it's going to start in. Some of them get terrain that's pretty challenging when it comes to producing food, or maybe another one will have good food but you don't have any hammers. So this is another thing you got to look at and ask yourself if you really want to play on that spot. If there's somewhere nearby you can move to that's better, or just re-roll. Another big one is whether or not you can be on a hill. Cities are just so much more defensible on a hill, and it also gives you more production. And in the early game, it really helps if you can get your, your scout done and your worker done and all of these things. You need them so badly, and the sooner you get them, the better. Being on the coast is mostly an advantage. It allows you to have sea-based trade routes, and it allows you to connect cities via harbor. Now, you don't have to have your capital on the coast necessarily to do that, but a coastal city can be an advantage. There's also a disadvantage, which is that it's fewer land tiles to work. So that's probably one of the least important things for a capital, but nonetheless, net, I would definitely call it a plus. Another thing that's good is if you can settle adjacent to a mountain. Once you build a national college, and later in the game, once you get astronomy, you can build an observatory if you're adjacent to a mountain. A capital that has both of those two things built is going to generate potentially a lot of science. And the taller you grow that city, the more that'll be true. The other thing you can also look at is what I would just call other resources. So you could be near stone, wheat, sheep, that kind of thing. Now, pretty much all of the other major resources that I can think of off the top of my head, you won't know about yet. You won't know if you're going to get iron until you open up a technology that lets you see it. You won't know if it's got horses. Cattle, that's another one you can see. But yeah, so there's a handful of them you can see, and they help. Like cattle and wheat really are nice food tiles early on. And, they go into the mix as well in determining a good location. Okay, so let's say that you have founded your first city, and now you have to start making things in that city. Now, one of the things I thought was interesting is after recording these first 5 chapters, I wanted to check and see what other people said before recording this one, just to make sure I'm not just wildly off. The thing that I thought was funny is that in a lot of ways there's so little consensus. You'll have people who skip a scout entirely. You'll have people who build a worker first. I mean, it's all over the map. So unfortunately, I don't have sort of one giant consensus to offer. But I'll throw this out there as a starting point based on my own experiences. And to the extent I was able to, gather a consensus from other people, that's in here too. All right, number 1, I would start with a scout. A scout will help you, open up the terrain around you so you can see what's going on. You'll meet new civilizations. You'll meet city-states and get rewards for that. You'll find ruins, which is arguably their most important function, especially in terms of needing to do it immediately. And some of those rewards are very good. When you find a ruin and you get +1 population to your capital, free technology, these are things that are pretty huge. You can get enough faith that you can instantly do a pantheon. So yeah, number 1, I would do a scout. Now, number 2, I did a monument, but this is kind of optional, actually. Part of it depends on whether you find a ruin that gives you a culture bonus. Because if you do, you'll get your first social policy early. And if you go into tradition, the culture bonus you'll get from that will keep those policies coming pretty quickly. And it'll also give you a free monument. Now, I tend to like building my monument so that I get a free amphitheater later in my capital instead. But it's perfectly legitimate to just skip the monument and, move on to the next thing. Now, I also did not build a shrine. I just didn't really want to get bogged down with religion in this playthrough. However, I was remiss in not at least talking about it. You can build a shrine very quickly once you research pottery. If you haven't finished pottery when you finish the scout, you can put your production into a worker and then switch when it's done, when pottery's done, and then go back to the worker when you finish the shrine. So if you want to get at least a pantheon and get the bonus from that, which is probably a good idea, you could go scout into shrine and then build your worker. I would definitely do a worker no later than your third, build, whatever you want to call it, your third project for your capital. The worker will allow you to improve luxuries, build farms so you can grow faster. In the early game, that's probably mostly where you want to invest your energy. Then I would probably go for a settler. Now, you need to get to 4 population first. And a lot of these things, by the way, are going to work like that. They're going to depend on what else is going on in the game. So absolutely, feel free to move these things around as the situation dictates. But if you can get your population up to 4, then I would start on the settler. A caravan is another one. I would say these next few, you can juggle the order depending on what's going on. So a caravan to get your gold up if you need it. You may have some luxuries that are spinning off good gold, and then maybe it's not quite as important for you. A granary, that's very big, and then a library as well. And I would go library into National College if at all possible. Now, I actually need to go back and just correct one thing. I mentioned, maybe a caravan is less important if you're not going for, if you don't need the gold. Well, okay, that's not entirely true, because arguably you should be potentially using your first caravan, the first, at least the first 30-turn trade route you do. You probably want to send food to your brand new second city. After you build that settler, doing a caravan to send food to that city is probably not a bad idea. So again, there's some flexibility in there, but that's kind of a blueprint to start from. As far as technology, same exact thing here. You just cannot say, here's a list of the first 8 technologies, and this is what you should always do. There's no way to do that. But I would start with pottery, and that will open up both shrines and granaries. And we talked earlier about how, they're both good early structures. It also opens up the door to the calendar. And after pottery, I would build a luxury, I would research a luxury tech next. And if you have a luxury that will be improved by a plantation, I would prioritize calendar over anything else. So if you have, something like gems, don't research mining, research calendar. The third tech you probably want to go after is animal husbandry. One of the reasons for that is not only will it allow you to improve something like sheep or cattle if they're nearby, but it'll reveal horses on the map. And you want to get ready to found your second city as soon as you can. And whether or not there's horses, that could be a determining factor in getting those inside your boundary. So there's a number of advantages to that. Next up, you'd probably be looking at either archery, if you're feeling threatened by barbarians or another civilization, or a second luxury. And then I would go into writing and philosophy. And of course, all of these things are interconnected. I'm covering them separately, but when we were talking about the build order before, obviously you're not doing the library if you haven't researched writing. And you're not doing the National College if you haven't researched philosophy. So as you're going through the game, just remember these things are interconnected. Now, for social policy, this again is, I'm not really going to be able to give you a universal blueprint. I would definitely say start with tradition. And I usually lead with legalism because I want to open up with landed elite and monarchy after that. And you can't take those unless you have legalism. I love the growth from landed elite, and I take it first every chance I get. But, you know, if you're getting your butt kicked by barbarians, or if you happen to be next to Attila or something, and he's coming after you from the start, then you're going to want to take oligarchy a lot sooner. So my usual order that I go in is legalism, landed elite, monarchy, aristocracy, oligarchy. But absolutely, positively, if you're going to do something that one of these will really benefit, you know, and you want to do that thing earlier, then go that way. You know, if you're going to build the National College at record pace, or you're going to go for the Great Library or something like that, yeah, hey, you know, go ahead and take aristocracy and get that bonus on building the wonder. Let's talk for a second about just working to develop your capital. And I guess when I say develop, I'm talking about which tiles you want to improve first, because we already talked about the build order. So the first priority is really to improve your food production sufficiently that you can get to at least 4 population as soon as possible. Because ideally, you want to get to 4, build a settler, found your second city as soon as you can. So tied to that, you also need to improve at least 1 luxury. Otherwise, you're not going to have the happiness to support a second city, most likely. Now, improving more luxuries, if you can, without letting your growth slow down, that's great, because, you know, you can trade that second copy. If you have, let's say, 2 sugar, and you can trade 1 away for like 6 or 7 gold a turn, that gold will come in really handy. I mean, it does all game long, but in the early game, you're so strapped that it could really help you out. Like, you could be able to build a library, buy a library in your second city, so you can just, you know, hit that national college right away, that kind of thing. So it definitely is worth doing, as long as you don't sacrifice the ability to keep your city growing. Another thing that, I guess the other priority would be production. Now, what I usually try to do with that is, I'm not going to sit there and do something like build a mine on a tile that has no food, because I can't really afford to work that when my city is very small. But let's say you have something like cattle. If you can build a pasture on a 3 food tile, like cattle, you build that pasture, you get +1 hammer. So that's awesome. You're working that tile anyway. You just picked up a free hammer. And at that stage of the game, where you may only have like 5 or 6 total for your capital, you know, maybe 8 or 9 if you're lucky, well, hey, I mean, that extra hammer is a lot. So that's that, I suppose. Now, in terms of founding additional cities, as I just said, you want to build your first settler as soon as you can once you're at 4 population. Make sure you have the happiness to support that. And this is true not only of your first one, but of the future ones. And then you need to have a strategy to get the National College going. Like, you need to make sure you're timing the research so that as soon as you get your second city founded and you get the library up, you go right into the National College in whichever city you're going to build it. It'll most often be your capital, but every now and then it happens that the location for your second city, you could just see it's going to be perfect for science. Like, maybe it's next to a mountain. Maybe it's going to have insane food production, so you know you can grow the thing to the sky. and long term it'll produce a lot more science in your capital. I don't know. But if you sense that that's the way you want to go, then fine, build it in your second city. Once the second one is down and you have the National College up and running, now you're looking to found numbers 3 and 4 as soon as you can. It takes so many turns to grow your population up to, 7, 8, 9, 10, where you start actually getting crap done at a reasonable pace. The sooner you start the clock ticking, the better. The whole idea of this kind of start is we aren't talking about pursuing one particular victory type or anything like that. You're trying to build a really good solid base, and then you can move forward from there and try to pursue a science victory, try to pursue culture or, diplomacy, whatever. And so the sooner you can really have that power base set up, the better. And the other reason to move fast, by the way, is the AI will not be sitting there forever. If you have good areas around you that are suitable for building cities and you don't fill it up, I promise you they will. And the higher the difficulty level, the faster that will be true. Deity is truly ridiculous in that way, but even on Immortal, it can get pretty ugly if you're kind of farting around doing other stuff and you let too much time pass. You'll just get boxed in. And then your only choice will be to try and take cities from someone who has, all kinds of bonuses compared to you and more cities to produce military units in. And you could just lose because of that. So, yeah. All right. That's enough talk about founding additional cities. Now, let's talk more about things that can go wrong. I guess I just touched on one of them, which is that your neighbors, at times, they can expand very aggressively. And if that happens, you can get hemmed in, and you're just going to have a very difficult time breaking out of that. So that's one reason why you really want to push hard to get those third and fourth cities down. And if you can see that you're only going to have 3, you just do not have a fourth spot that's going to work, then I would say you need to seriously look at what you're doing and how you can start researching military technologies and building military units, because you need to get over to whoever you think the best candidate is and take a good city from them. Not, don't go after a piece of crap just because it looks weak. You have to take one where you can look at it and go, hey, there's at least one unique luxury there that I don't have. There's good food production. This is a city that if I had time, I could easily grow to, 20 population. The game may not go that long, that's fine. But you could see real potential there. So, 20 is overkill, but seriously, you should be able to grow it to at least 15. So, that would be number one. Now, the other thing that can happen, and it's related to that, is you can be planted next to a very aggressive neighbor. You can be next to Attila or Askia or, any number of guys, Genghis Khan. And let me tell you, man, they're coming for you. So, and the higher the difficulty level, I believe, the more that's true. So if that happens, that's when you need to make sure you prioritize archery and some of these other early military technologies. You don't have to spend every turn building more military units. You can still go for the basic plan I'm talking about, but you need to build 2 or 3 archers, protect your cities. If you've watched any of my Let's Plays, you can actually hold off a fair number of units with a lot less, as long as you use them wisely. And if you have ranged units inside of a city, between city bombardment and your ranged unit, and especially if you pick, I believe it's oligarchy that helps improve the firepower of your city. If you've got a garrisoned unit there, you can actually shred their stuff pretty quickly. Building walls, that would be another very high priority in a situation like that. And I said 2 or 3 archers. I probably should have said like 3 or 4. I mean, don't underdo it. But yeah, but you don't need a million guys. You really don't. You just need to be able to hit them hard, kill at least 1 unit every turn. And if you do that, it's amazing how quickly they start to lose interest in the fight. So, okay, I think that this is a reasonable summary of what we've covered so far. And hopefully you'll find it useful. I wanted to put it in a little bit more condensed form so that if you ever want to go back and kind of review it and refresh yourself on it, again, you don't have to sit through hours of gameplay footage to do it. As always with this series, I'm very much still figuring out how to do this. Civilization 5 is such a deep game, a complicated game. There's so many variables. So if there's particular material you'd like to see me cover, by all means, let me know in the comments. And I guess by the same token, if this was helpful to you, it's always nice to know that as well. I'm not fishing for compliments. Honestly, I'm just trying to figure out when I'm doing something right or if I'm missing something that you'd like to see. So I think that's going to do it for now. And thank you